Hello Matrix Live, this is Tim. I'm back and I'm with Erlend today to talk about Commune. So Commune is a project we didn't know about it at all until HQ, the main developer of Commune, came in this week in Matrix and dropped a message and a few screenshots, and we were just amazed by the level of polish of the early version of Commune. So Erlend is the product manager somehow of Commune and is with me to answer a few questions about it today. The first one, people who follow the show probably have noticed that my English is terrible, and that's because I'm French. And for me, Commune is either a small group of cities or an anarchist movement of the late 1800s. So, Ellen, what is Commune actually?
Yeah, we take the word commune in the widest possible definition, really just a gathering of people, a group of people coming together for a common purpose. That's how we see a commune. And maybe you could say we take it as a bit of a challenge as well to make really good communes, because communes do have a bit of a reputation of coming together for a bit of a too strong of an ideological cause, and they have really good times for a few years, and then things kind of get out of control a little bit. In a lot of these more physical communities, I'm extremely fascinated with how those come together, and then what makes them work, the ones that really pull through as well. But yeah, for us, it really just is about people being grouped together, and that's what we want to do here, is create this a sort of new space for people to coexist.
So this is obviously Matrix Live, so it's a Matrix client. It's related in Matrix in some way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sort of Matrix client, but a bit more than that. Can we have a look at it?
Yeah. Yes. So let's see. All right. So, as mentioned, we're sort of in pre-alpha right now, so this isn't really a final representation of what we want the application to look at. It's very Discordy at the moment, because we think that's a generally good design, and so we kind of just use that as our jumping off point, and I've just been building in all the essentials of a pleasant chat. The interesting parts are really the topics that this is the result of testing out the two different forms that are possible. I think if I click here, it's just going to break now at the moment, so I'm not going to do that. The idea is that in any kind of communication space, a channel that you create on Commune, you can open up any number of streams, primarily a chat stream and a topics stream. So in this same space, you can swap between chat or topics. And this is the part that we're working on making even more seamless, so that, for instance, if you're creating a topic, you'll of course see that pop up here in chat, so you can hop into it. If you are in chat and you are just creating a inline thread first while chatting, you can easily migrate that, if you will, or progressively enhance it to a full-on topic that starts living in the separate stream. And you also have a different default depending on which channel you have. For this channel, the default is you'll be hopping right onto chat when you're entering it. For this other channel, you're hopping right onto a topics list when you're getting into it. And I think that's all there is to say about it for now. That's worthwhile, because otherwise I would just be trying to come up with stuff that is coming, but we can show for real later anyhow. So I think we can make this it for this time around, and we'll hopefully have quite a bit more to show in the next couple months.
Cool demo. So Commune looks really fine already for a very young project. Have you been walking in the shadows before making it public?
A little bit, yeah. Well, quite a bit. We got together about 10 months ago now, almost a year ago, when HQ he first published something called Hummingbird on Hacker News, and this was a kind of Reddit-esque type of page that was also based on Matrix. So essentially, it was one of the first forum-like applications that was built on top of the Matrix protocol. And I think like the day I saw this, I immediately got in touch with him because I had kind of been on the lookout for something like this for a very long time. Some context about me: I've worked for Discourse for a long time, the open source forum application. Was one of the early employees there, worked there for a long time. Eventually, as VP of community, went on a sort of extended break for 2 or so years. Then I worked there again now for the past 6 months to start up and launch their Discourse chat product. And the combination of chat and forum has been on my mind for half a decade already. And I always felt like Matrix was a key component of this as well, that the next generation communications application would have to be built on top of Matrix, seeing as it's looking really good now as the next gen protocol for general purpose communication, just sending messages back and forth, whether it's a chat message or it's a long form forum message. Matrix seems to be sort of a no-brainer for me at this point, as something that a future-facing comms app should support. So yeah, this Hummingbird thing showing up, this was a big revelation to me, seeing like, I've heard people talk about it for a long time that this should be doable, but I hadn't really seen anyone do it. And here was HQ showing that it could indeed be done. But he kind of had a little bit more simpler and limited vision of it at the time. Of this was just kind of a fun Reddit-like experiment. And I got in touch, so we started immediately talking about slightly grander ideas of what something like this could become. Most importantly, just me kind of saying, what if you shove chat into this? And we found a way to have chat and forums together. And he was super into that. And after some months of talking through the ideas, we so it's been about 6 months now since Commune development kind of started in earnest. And yeah, I can tell you a bit more about that in a sec. But that's essentially how this whole thing started, and why it all kind of happened out of the public eye was because I mean, even to this day, we're still sort of prototyping a lot and figuring out exactly what we want this thing to look and work like, and it's still not fully set in stone, but we wanted to at least have sort of the rudimentary vision in place for it before opening it up more. But now that's in place, and it can be more public, and the next few months are going to be really active now. So it's going to be exciting to develop this much more in the open, which is what I'm far more used to actually than doing this whole private thing. That's not really my standard way of product development at all. Coming from places like Discourse, we do a whole lot in public, so that's a whole lot more fun. So this is going to be a good time now.
Right, so a lot to unpack in what you say. It's basically Commune is the child of Hummingbird and Discourse in a way.
Yeah.
And what you could not fully do at Discourse, you're trying to do it on Commune. So to have your vision of a chat and forum. So it's going beyond instant messaging on Matrix. It's very exciting. Yeah. I want to see that. So you really already answered almost my two next questions, which were that Commune is already good for a first project. So I did not believe it was a first project, but this is because you have already worked on Hummingbird. So it's plural, you and HQ. What are the main lessons learned from working on Hummingbird?
Well, I think most importantly, it just got HQ really used to all the intricacies of the Matrix protocol and of working with the Matrix toolkit in general. So he had a pretty clear idea of the challenges we had ahead of us when we went into Commune. But even so, of course, we ran into several challenges still. Most notably being we've tried multiple times to implement threads on top of the matrix spec that is I think the MSC is still pending merging, and there are just these other prototypes out there, and it's looking super promising, but yeah, that still wasn't quite workable for the types of just more standard forum type threads or topics that we need. So yeah, we it helped us be a lot more prepared, but certainly there's still been plenty to explore. But on the UI end, I feel like we got roughly to where we wanted to be very quickly, into this sort of it works state of good enough. That was easy to get to, but yeah, now it's just been a lot of sort of moving pieces around to see what the actual final fit is for what we want to make. Maybe we'll come back to that a little later, but there is I guess we can just cover it now. The main piece that we're trying to make work here that isn't fully reflected yet in the application, it's this flow of content and how it can live online and going from the ephemeral to the more permanent. So we want to have this application wherein I start by sending a message to you, you send a message back to me. We're now just having a quick ephemeral light conversation. We're trying to grow some idea together. And this little chat needs to be able to progressively go from being a chat to being a forum post to maybe even eventually being more of a documentation article. And the whole trail from beginning to finish should be very easy to track. And that's really the essence of what we're working on, is to allow content to not live too rigidly in either one of these modes of communication, if you will. Like, you should be able to chat with a person being very comfortable with the knowledge that whatever you're typing here now, it's not going to be a hassle later to convert this content into something that later is more easily to work into a blog post or a long-term exchange with a larger amount of people.
All right, so one of the main components to allow that is threads, and I think you are not exactly using the regular threads that are going to land in the specification.
Yeah.
Do you want to stick to the specification, and are you going to work on a MSC to try to upstream your changes?
Mm-hmm. We always want to work on the specifications. It's just not always possible. So our approach is generally, we'll try it, and if it's not fitting our actual use case quite right, then we'll just work around it, sort of roll our own solution as we need it, with the hope of finding some way to bringing it upstream later on. We obviously want to be as compatible with the Matrix protocol as possible, but at the same time, we're trying to make a type of application that is a little bit out of the ordinary Matrix application that exists right now. But what fills me with a lot of confidence is a lot of what we're doing is in part inspired by writings from Matrix employees who have talked about the longer term vision of Matrix, incorporating such things as email, for instance, should eventually be a part of the Matrix experience. And that is kind of what we're trying to build towards and kind of leapfrog a little bit and play with some of these possibilities that aren't yet very workable in the spec as it is now. But yeah, with the spec evolving and hopefully with us being able to help it evolve in some of these areas as well, we're very hopeful that will kind of converge the more mature this application gets and the more mature the spec of Matrix gets.
Yes, actually, to extend the spec, you need to have a working implementation. So you are
Yeah.
already sort of doing the right thing. And I'm excited to see new use cases such as email integration in the client based on Matrix.
Yeah.
One thing I've been wondering, when you go to the demo app of Commune, it's not really obvious to me that it's Matrix or that it's federated. Is Commune going to be federated, or are people going to pop up their little Commune in their own bubble?
What our current thinking is that it absolutely will support federation, but it will be more of an opt-in for us rather than a default. There are a couple of reasons for that. One being just federation is kind of it just simply is more advanced, and we are trying very hard to make a chat application that our collective grandparents can use. And I absolutely think Matrix as a whole, Element, it's definitely heading that way as well. But something like Federation that Element obviously takes very seriously and wants to have top-notch support for, we don't really see that as we were happy to kind of outsource that one a little bit to Element, Matrix, and then the rest of the ecosystem at large. We feel like that has enough coverage already. So while we definitely want to do that as well and be part of it, we're also quite intent on seeing kind of what doors can open up for us if we opt out of that a little bit to begin with, and say, what does it look like if that's something that can come later, that a community can kind of grow on its own first, not have to worry about these other complexities, and then when you feel like you want to dip into this larger universe, you can make that move later.
Right, so federation can be a bit difficult, so you want to have a really more focused vision on the product, and then
Yeah.
if you can, you want to open more to federation later.
Yeah, it comes
Right.
down to the ease of self-hosting as well, and that's gonna take a while. Like our fully long-term vision for that kind of depends on something like what is it? It's Dendrite, isn't it? The Go one, or am I mixing it? And Conduit, the Rust version of it, the Rust server. Solutions like these are kind of what we're relying on for the long term for how to do self-hosting properly, because Synapse is what works right now. It's far more reliable than anything else, but it's quite large, and the self-hosting story of it is quite tricky. So yeah, a simplified server toolkit and the optionality of federation, that's quite important for us in the long term, of being able to tell users, just download this package, kind of click a button, and you'll have your community up and running. In the meantime, we're just going to be focusing on making this effectively like a software as a service and making that part of the app work great. But what we really want to get to down the end is to make this the self-hosting experience kind of as easy as it was back in the day, of just dragging a folder into a server somewhere, and you're kind of up and running that way. I feel like the self-hosting story of today with most applications has gotten more complicated rather than simpler.
Right. So that's very interesting, because you mentioned SaaS. So I guess this is how you want to monetize Commune, obviously, but you also want Commune to be self-hostable. In my understanding, Commune is going to be a standard matrix server plus a few bridges plus the front end. So that's a few moving parts. So HQ is not here, so we're not going to deep dive in the details. But from the product perspective, can somebody deploy a server, then deploy the bridge, then deploy the front end, or are you just going to give a full package to people to install Commune, which has all those breaks inside?
I mean, I would be lying if I said we had a clear vision for that already. But I suppose simply put, what we want to make possible is obviously you should be able to just download or access Commune on a URL, join some community, and you wouldn't know that you have the capability to self-host it. But ideally, that's going to be there already if you're already using the application. Obviously, that's the ideal, and that's again one of those hopeful things about the Matrix future as well. Something like the peer-to-peer functionality that's coming up. That to me is an incredibly exciting future to get to be part of, and kind of know that we are building on top of something that is intent on supporting something very, very complicated and hard to do like that. It's so exciting to me because in the current day, even if you make it really simple, you come to a point where it still just isn't really feasible for a lot of people to self-host an application, especially like a forum application that is, or forum or chat application that is more resource hungry. And that's a huge bummer that we have these computers already. They're already quite darn powerful, and they can run a static blog or even a dynamic blog with ease, but our systems for communicating with each other aren't at that point yet at all. So while it's all still pretty loose, and it's pretty clear to us where we are headed with it. But like exactly how we want to package it up, that's still a bit up in the air.
All right, still a few moving parts. Dendrite is still under heavy development, Conduit as well. So given that you don't want to pick Synapse, but one of the two, I guess the packaging is going to depend on which server you're going to pick eventually.
Yeah.
One interesting thing I found when browsing the repository is the license. It's the non-commercial license, which is not a very usual one. So it's open source but not fully libre. Can you expand a bit on what that license is and why you picked this one?
Yeah, I love that we're using this license. It's a fun ride to me because I've known about it for quite a long time. It's co-written by a former colleague of me from Discourse, Kyle Mitchell, and I believe Heather Meeker. They co-wrote this license together. They're sort of titans of open source licensing together. They're wonderful. They do a lot of great work and share information in the open source ecosystem. And this license, it does something that's really common elsewhere in open sharing. Like this is just like the Creative Commons license for art assets. And artists have been using it for over a decade already with no major quarrels. As the cutoff point is so simple. It just says, if you're using this thing non-commercially, then this is effectively a regular open source license for you. You can hack on it, you can redistribute it, you can do whatever you want really. But if you want to use this software commercially, then basically come talk to us. And depending on what setup you have as an application provider then or service provider, You'll just pay a license fee, or you'll talk to the makers of the application to get the rights to use this thing commercially. And this is pretty crucial, and it's something that doesn't exist in regular open source. And frankly, we're seeing the effects of that on a very regular basis. Most recently, it's the log4, whatever the name is of the Java thing, right? Yeah. And I didn't even catch up on that story this time around. Usually I'd be all over that, but at this point, like, I've heard that story too many times. I know the story in and out of. It's a bunch of like great developers. They made something absolutely invaluable for the internet, but they don't have a setup to be self-sustainable. They don't have a way to make a little bit of a push for people who are so dependent on their application that they should absolutely be paying them, whether it's some small amount or it's some huge enterprise that obviously should really be paying them millions, really. And this obviously is a problem. And it's not like we're without solutions in general open source practice. Like Discourse, the easiest example to draw from for me, GPL licensed software, just like WordPress and so many others. The forum application itself is 100% free and open source, out there for everyone to hack on. However, in order to sell Discourse, what the Discourse company does is, again, like basically everyone else who can do this with a end user application, they make a hosted service that they sell to people, a software as a service. And what's really happening there, of course, is that there is a component of this whole hosting story now that is, in fact, entirely closed. And that's like the infrastructure portion of this. And that becomes the secret sauce of the Discourse company. And so, in effect, almost every software as a service company out there that delivers some sort of open source application, and this is going to be one of those kind of controversial statements, but we're all basically running these open core businesses, because there is a open component and there is a closed component, but the closed component isn't even shared at all because it's just kept completely out of view. And that's the infrastructure part of all of these open source hosting companies. And while I think that works out fine enough, I want to explore the alternative. I want to see what else is possible. Like, I'm in no way strictly in one lane or the other. I just want to explore more. And this way of licensing, it hasn't been done much. And the most magical thing that happens there is that whatever we make in terms of infrastructure for ourselves in order to make hosting super easy, we have a great incentive to share that just as openly as everything else, because we can actually put a price tag on it. We can share our full self-hosting setup, and we have a strong incentive to keep on making it better, because people are going to be buying it from us. If they need to be using it commercially, they are going to come talk to us and say, hey, I need a commercial license for this. What do I do now? And we're going to figure out some kind of pricing structure together. And it's also, it's pretty easy to figure out licensing for any kind of open application, because you can't really hide stuff away. What's there is what's there. And when people can already do the self-hosting themselves, get set up, see how hard it is, it's pretty difficult to mess around a whole lot with the pricing structure. The more transparency there is, the easier it is to negotiate pricing as well, because it just becomes a very straightforward talk of, well, you can see what we've made here, and you can see how hard it is if you want to do this all by yourself. So yeah, let's figure out a price that works for both of us. And that's to wrap this up. That's where you see the main difference between what we're doing and something like Discourse, is that while it's quite self-hostable, it has a pretty decent setup. That setup hasn't changed really in any significant way ever since Discourse launched, quite simply because it doesn't have this inbuilt incentive to keep making that experience better. In fact, it actually competes with the hosted Discourse experience. Again, just like any other application like WordPress, if the self-hosted version doesn't have this incentive to make itself self-sustaining, then that part of the product and community will suffer a bit. That's just a fact of incentives, really. And that's what we're really excited to try out an alternative with, and then see what this can look like with a slightly different but still very open license. And ultimately, of course, anything that fits as a just ordinary MIT licensed general purpose library, all of that will be shared as such. Like if we make some kind of utility library for the Commune app that we realize, oh, this is actually useful for any other matrix application, of course we'll just share that in a fully like liberal license for everyone else to use without any kind of non-commercial use limitations, because it's only the app that we're interested in trying to protecting a little bit.
Okay, so really here it's a reflection about how you want your business model to work and how you want to be sustainable to keep developing Commune.
So basically we want to both have a regular sort of revenue stream through being a software as a service, because that's just another way really also of consuming an application. But we want the flip side of that to be equally commercializable with this license, because that's what we see is lacking in most other businesses, is they do the SaaS business, but the other side of it, they can't really move on because their hands are tied by their license.
Right. Okay. Do you have a public roadmap with all the fancy things you want to implement and that are going to be funded thanks to that license?
Well, the simplest way to put our public roadmap now is that by middle of 2022, July essentially of 2022, we want to have the app at a place where it's mature enough that we can now put a price tag on it and say, come pay for this if you want to use this. And obviously there will be some version of that is going to be of free use as well. But we're not a startup with the big VC money, so we can't just do like a big hosted service free for everyone straight out of gate. We gotta have some way of stepwise ramping this up. But we definitely want it to be as free as humanly possible without driving ourselves into the ground, because that's the very straightforward accessibility feature as well. For something to be free, we need to have a way to make it freely accessible to those who aren't interested or can't pay for it. So along the way there, really the only missing piece in the application itself is what I talked about earlier about sort of progressive enhancement or stabilization of a piece of messaging. That's nearly there. We kind of have all the separate features for it. Like we can do in-chat threads, we can do totally separate topics, but it's not very well tied together yet. You don't have the progression that you can sort of easily follow through of a red thread from a piece of discussion starting in chat and then moving on elsewhere. We don't have a good way of tying that together yet. So that's really what's coming next, is a more cohesive experience, because we kind of put in the right features already, but it still looks mostly just like someone found a copy of Discord and started hacking on it with some other new features. It doesn't. It looks confusing at the moment. If you just open up like sort of our standard opening community it's not what we want that to look like. I suppose I could try to give like a really quick almost like imagination exercise of what we really want this to be, because there is a sweet spot, in my opinion, between the likes of Discord and the likes of Discourse, which unfortunately have very similar names. And we also run into that quite a lot at the Discourse. But in a Discord, it's the nice part of that experience is you hop into this room and you can kind of tell that there's buzz, there's activity around, and it's easy to just plop in somewhere and start speaking because everyone's chattering about already. It's this little party of people, and conversations are already happening. So it's easy to just find your way into some conversation and start sharing a little bit of your own mind. However, it's very unstructured. It's just this large space. So it's kind of a massive party. Whereas on Discourse, you kind of have the opposite problem. It's very neatly structured. You can get on a Discourse forum and you can immediately get a sense for what are the key conversations that have been happening here recently. However, it's hard to get into discussions because these are all long posts like, wow, all these people seem to really know what they're talking about. I just arrived. I just had this simple little question I wanted to ask. And here people are sort of making these long and big effort posts about these topics that I know so little about. So like, what's my way in here? And we've always known that at Discourse that the easiest way to start any community, it is with chat, because you get two people into a chat room and you kind of have the workings of a community already, because chatter will just emerge from there. So we want to find the sweet spot in between there, where you can enter a space and you will immediately have some rudimentary structure telling you this is the key activity going on in this community, and this is where you can hop in and get started right away, and that should kind of be it. And you try to hide away most of the other complexities of both types of applications in the beginning. You want just this tiny little space. You want kind of the hallway almost of a house where you meet up there first. There's nothing else to see, nothing else to click on, to go to. You're just forced into this slightly limited container while you're kind of still getting your bearings. So yeah, with that, you should be able to get this sense for sort of where you are in space without getting concerned with immediately missing out.
All right, so your next big milestone is to sort of unify instant messaging and forums, in short.
Yeah, and I guess we're now kind of settling also on going all in on Synapse for now, because we've also spent some time experimenting with these alternative servers like Conduit and Dendrite, but those are just still, it's too early days for us to try to build a fully functioning product on top of either of these yet. So up until the turn of the new year, we were also playing around with that a bit, but now we're kind of fully settled on, we're building on Synapse. We're also building just a hosted service for now. We're not gonna worry yet about the self-hosting component of our larger vision. So it's just gonna be, essentially, it's gonna be commune.chat. This should be a place you could go to and immediately get to play with a fun messenger experience.
All right. Do you want to add anything to conclude the episode?
Let's see. Well, I'm going to try not to ramble on too much on this, but I could just speak generally a bit about yeah, the matrix ecosystem and what's exciting about this. Because to me, like I love having finally this way in to matrix. Like I've known about it practically since it appeared on the interwebs, I feel like, and it just always sounded like a really great idea. Um, of course, I never like took it for granted that it was just easily gonna work itself out. Creating a new internet-wide protocol is quite something. But I am so uh, exhausted with where we are with the really like wonderful protocols that got us so far, like email and like IRC. Uh, they really paved the way and did some marvelous things. But I really had my hopes up for Matrix since the start, and it's so exciting now to see the maturity that it's getting into, and the funding as well that's coming into it from really cool places too, like Automatic, WordPress getting involved. That to me was like a big. Do people say green flags instead of red ones? That at least was a very promising signal for me to see these kinds of people getting into it, as they kind of almost in a way are operating their own protocol as well. They're kind of operating the standard CMS protocol in a sense with WordPress, with how incredibly popular it is. And yeah, to now have found my way into it with Commune, it's just really exciting to be part of this, because I feel like the Matrix community at large, it seems to have a lot in common actually with the Rust language community. And the Rust language community quite stands out with how it's equally human-centric as it is technology-centric. And I feel like I can say very similar things about Matrix, although I'm just now kind of beginning to delve more deeply into the community. I always felt like this was almost like both the blessing and the curse of the Matrix team at large, and the Element team as well, that the spec kind of always came first, and yeah, that has allowed it to develop in an amazing way. And it's now things like threads are coming to fruition. And we're about to no longer be doing video calls on this anymore. Like that's going to be just a native part of the Matrix protocol now. Yeah, I just love the fact that there are all these conversations going on, that it's allowed to be a bit ideological in this community without it being kind of, what are you even getting on about now? Because the Matrix folks have been quite illogical since the very start. And I think there were quite a bit of naysayers going, you're just kind of thinking too big and taking this too far. You gotta start with the small stuff. And of course, at times, I think these kinds of comments will always have been right. There will always have been some truth to it, but it's clearly still chugging along just fine. Everyone's muddling through, and the pieces are really starting to come together. And the user experience now is very close to being on par with the likes of Discord, that has a significantly smaller challenge since it's not doing things like end-to-end encryption straight out of the gate. And that's where we come from too, as a team at Commune. We're a funny coupling. We're this incredibly privileged guy from Norway partnered together with HQ in an undisclosed location. I'm sure he'll share a lot more about his story later, but it's quite the trip to be working together in this way, and when we're daily talking to each other about our experiences. And for the past 2 weeks or so, HQ hasn't been around a whole lot at all because he just immediately had to move because there was a highway, I think, that was suddenly coming through his apartment. And so it's always on our mind, who are we trying to serve? And it can't possibly just be the likes of me and my type of user. It has to be his type of community and his way of living as well. And that's all of that sort of comes into things like experimenting with this license, because HQ in his position, he can't really just work on something open source for years and years and hope that that'll eventually work itself out somehow, that he'll get hired in the right place, or that he can eventually build a business around it. If this was just him, and that's kind of how we're playing this, there's no way he could build this without sooner rather than later charging for money somehow. And that's really what real sustainability looks like in software, is that you build software, you sell software. It has to be as simple as that if it's going to be sustainable for anyone to do this kind of thing. You need to be able to put a price tag on what you've built without having the world come down on you for doing it wrong. We don't really think there is such a thing as doing open software wrong, as long as you're trying your best to open up what you're doing, you're following open practices, then I think you're on the right track. Not everything has to be sort of officially ordained by the OSI and the more traditional practices and traditional licenses we have. We've come an incredibly long way with open source in the last few decades. And I'm so grateful for all the people that brought us here. But I really hope the conversation now can move more towards simply how do people make ends meet with the software they produce. That should really be problem number one, is how does someone making software how does that make their own life better as well? Because I've seen far too many projects that have so much potential but don't go anywhere because we're still not that good at sharing stories and sharing models for how to make software, how to make open software whichever way works for whatever situation you're in. And that's a huge part of our exploration here as well, is we're going to allow ourselves to be a little bit ideological and in a sense even build that into the product and have that as an intrinsic part of what we're making. And hopefully, like Matrix at large, will manage to sort of straddle the right line here and not go too far in either direction. We will be product builders while being ideologues. It's just really fun to get to be more part of this community now, because I think it's a bunch of really fine folks working together on something that's more than just sort of building the better mousetrap. We're all actually trying to create some sort of sea change, really, in how we own our software and how we communicate with each other.
Really cool. I really like this interview because I'm really fond of Commune, not only the software because it's the early days, but I'd say the product and the project more than the product. I really like the fact that you allow yourselves to explore things, and all the while sticking pretty closely to the matrix specification. So being upstream first is, well, not maybe upstream first, but upstream-minded project is really important, and I think it's obviously going to benefit you. You mentioned P2P earlier in the interview. If you want to benefit from P2P, obviously you need to stay close to what the protocol does. And I really like also that you allow yourself to explore a maybe controversial license, because you have a full vision of not only what the technicalities of the project, but also the social impact and how to make it sustainable. So really, it's been a very pleasant interview for me. Thank you for making Commune. I think we are going to have a follow-up interview in the coming month, maybe
Yeah, hope
in
so.
Q2 or Q3 2022 when you have something out, or if you have major release, a beta, something. I want to see Commune grow and see what it becomes. And I also love that it's trying to solve a problem we had for decades, I think now, transitioning from instant messaging to forums. It's something that we still haven't solved. So if you have solutions in that direction, and if you can build it in the specification, I'm really excited to see where Commune is going. So Erlend, thanks a lot for the interview. It's been super rich, a lot of information here,
Thank
but
you.
very, very valuable. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
And Matrix Live, see you next week.